This is a review for A.B. Yehoshua's The Liberated Bride. I think this would be a great book if you're interested in Israeli fiction, and also if you're interested in Middle Eastern dynamics, political dynamics, and also relational or family dynamics. A.B. Yehoshua is an Israeli writer who teaches at the university in Haifa. He grew up in Jerusalem, so he's very much tied to the geography of Israel and is very aware of the surrounding territories and countries and the dynamics between each of these places. He is a writer who is very popular in Israel and has been for a couple of decades. The book starts out at a wedding, and we learn that this professor is attending the wedding of one of his graduate assistants. This graduate assistant is having writer's block, or at least doesn't want to finish her final assignment. So she thinks that inviting this professor to her wedding and involving the rest of his family as well, mainly just his wife, will allow her to receive a final grade for the work she's done. However, she has not turned in her final term paper, and the professor has to decide an alternative assignment which she can complete at home. Decides to give her the assignment of translating poems of an old poet who's dead, but whose works have been recovered by a murdered scholar. The professor is working on a book about Middle Eastern politics and how the history of the Middle East can affect what's going on there currently, which is a lot of violence. He thinks that it'll help his research to be able to approach the issue with input of these more creative forces or the arts in culture. So the professor is wanting to learn more about the dynamics between Arabs and Israelis, and also Palestinians, in hopes of uncovering some type of truth regarding why there's such violence in that time. And I'm assuming that that time would have been the late 90s or early 2000s, which was when the book was written. At the same time, the professor is wanting to get more information about his son's marriage, which has recently fallen apart. He does this by going to visit the family of his ex-daughter-in-law to try to get answers from her and also from other people about why the marriage ended up not working out. It's all kind of a mystery to everyone. And he doesn't succeed ever in the novel. He never finds out what happened. The reader does find out about halfway through the book, and then that's corroborated at the very end in something that happens. It's interesting because this ex-daughter-in-law is getting married herself, or remarried, I should say. So we have the bride that is the main character's graduate assistant, who is married at the start of the novel. And we have this bride who is the main character's ex-daughter-in-law who's remarrying. At first I felt that this professor's search for truth, both in his personal life and in his academic or professional life, they are warranted, and I did empathize with him. But as the book progresses, he becomes quite unlikable. He seems very close-minded and actually pretty arrogant. And at the book's conclusion, I kind of interpreted that these two brides who were set up early on in the book concludes by them doing things which will allow them to free themselves of this professor or of the main character. My empathy kind of shifted more in their camp because of the general unlikability that I found the main character. The biggest issue that I took with The Liberated Bride is that I felt it was in need of an editor. There was a lot of extraneous information and kind of subplots that I don't really think mattered overall. and they definitely did not lead to kind of this streamlined approach to storytelling. So that's also something that I value when I read a book, is a sense of economy to the prose, that the writer is choosing to say as much as he or she can with as few of words. But overall, the prose, if you read it for itself, I did find it quite enjoyable and at times quite beautiful. I just want to give an example of the kind of beautiful complexity of sentences. So this is the first paragraph of the book. Had he known that on this evening, on the hill where the village held its celebrations, an evening suffused by the scent of a fig tree bent over the table like another venerable guest, he would again be struck, but powerfully, by a sense of failure and missed opportunity. He might have more decisively made his excuses to Samaher, his annoyingly ambitious M.A. student, who, not content with sending him an invitation by mail, and then repeating it to his face, had gone and chartered a minibus, after first urging the new department head to make sure the faculty attended her wedding. The prose is almost a run-on sentence. It just takes another few seconds of time to figure out what he's actually saying, and luckily this writer, or rather the translator, is quite liberal with punctuation, and that just creates kind of a paragraph that is a puzzle that you have to sift through for a second to understand the meaning. Another moment of somewhat poetic prose is towards the end of the book when a minor character dies. And I just want to read the moment that the main character walks in on this dead person. Dressed in his pajamas, he had apparently risen from bed and gone to his desk to do something at his computer. His arms embraced its lit screen, and his puckish face nuzzled its ivory keyboard, leaving the wife, 15 years his junior, to guess whether he had been slipped an ottoman sleeping potion, fainted from fright at her absence, or decided to bid a fond adieu to the world of scholarship. From the way she stood, tall and grave, without approaching for a closer look, it was evident which of these possibilities she believed in. The professor's heart went out to this grave woman, his loyal former classmate, who, surprisingly, did not seem to blame herself for her sudden liberation from the teacher who had trapped her. The writer never mentions that the man has died, although it's pretty obvious just with the images that he chooses to write with. And also interesting that he shifts the focus to the female's perspective, or to the man who has died, to his wife's perspective. And I guess one could make the case that she is another liberated bride. So other than quite a bit of extraneous plot, I did find this book quite enjoyable to read. I would read more of A.B. Yehoshua. Going back to some of the criteria that I mentioned in my first video, I think that the strongest thing about this book is the depth and quality of language. I don't necessarily think that he develops ideas enough to have a great depth of ideation, but the actual prose is worthwhile and, like I said, quite poetic at times. The evidence of agency I also didn't find so much in this book, mainly because of all the extraneous elements. There were many points that left me thinking, why does this matter? Will this actually end up affecting the conclusion of the work? When I did finish it, I can say that no, I don't think that they did. So that's the review for The Liberated Bride. The next review that I do will be for The Prague Orgy by Philip Roth.